Hi everyone, this is Liam from the Dreary Erie again, and this is one of those moments where I'm going to go back to what this channel was actually originally all about, and talk about D&D for a bit. Shocking, I know. Today I figured I'd talk about a topic that I really like. It's another monster topic, because I'm really into talking about the potential of monsters in D&D. Now, in this case, I was looking at Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition. Now, 5th Edition's been out for a while now, but I figured I'd make some videos, perhaps, about maybe what you could do with the creatures found in the Monster Manual. I've already gone over quite a few that I think would be decent player races if you were thinking of doing a game where players have really unorthodox, like, monster races. But today I figured I was going to talk about the Giants. One of my personal favorite things in 5th edition is how fleshed out the Giants are, and rightly so, as besides dragons, there's very few creatures with such a rich mythology to them. So here we have the Giants. There are many different types of giants. While that being said, there are actually 6 types of proper giants, and then a whole bunch of giant kin, similar races to the giants, such as ogres and Fomorians. Now, that's interesting because, of course, the Fomorians aren't really related to the giants in any way, but they're big, so the giants accept them as being kin. What's most striking about the 5th edition giants, rather than giants simply being like different forms of giants that are kind of like against each other or anything like that, or just stay out of each other's way, in this one, the giants all stem from a common source, and in so, they all know of each other's existence, and therefore have developed something called the Ordning. Now, something you'll notice about giants right away in D&D 5th is that they do have quite a bit of a Norse theme to them, with the Storm Giant and the Frost Giant being obviously very Norse-inspired. I mean, just looking at the Storm Giant, he essentially looks like a Viking, and Frost Giant, that goes without saying. But of course, as we know, giants are from all forms of different cultures, but these ones have a bit of a Norse bent to them. So, we have the Ordning, which essentially is it's kind of like a caste system. It's like, essentially, one type of giant is better than the other, and then the other, and then the other. So, essentially, you have this hierarchy where you've got storm giants at the top, followed by cloud giants, followed by followed by the fire giants and the frost giants, followed by the stone giants, then the hill giants, and then the giant kin. Now, it's rather interesting with this, as essentially you'll find that their ranking is directly related to their challenge rating. But essentially what is said in the Ordning is that even the lowest, let's say, for example, even the lowest stone giant, one who sucks at his job and just kind of stays on the outskirts of society, he might be the lowest of his kind, but he's still higher ranking than even the strongest and most well-respected hill giant. So again, it's kind of like a caste system, where, think of, you could be a grave digger, and you could be like a really wealthy grave digger. Like, let's say a lot of people are dying, you're getting paid for a lot of jobs, so you're in a lucrative field right now. But because you are a gravedigger, regardless of how much money you're making from that job, you're still lower than even the lowest bookkeeper in an accounting firm, simply due to the fact that your job is not as prestigious. And so, with that said, we're now going to go through the different forms of giant in 5th edition. We've got, of course, our bog standard hill giant, as we were to say, the weakest of the true giants. The hill giant, in gameplay terms, can basically do one of two things. He can club you, or he can throw a rock at you. The hill giant is portrayed as being rather stupid and generally rather gluttonous. And in fact, if we look at the hill giant's stats in the game, he has an intelligence of 5, which is well below the average human intelligence. So essentially the hill giants are ones that they're the giants that were never challenged with any serious threats, so they never adapted past their primitive form. You could argue that the hill giant obviously may have degenerated, maybe not have faced the same threats. So hill giants are a pretty good enemy in general, honestly. You're not going to be making a lot of notable hill giant NPCs. Well, you can, but here's the hill giant's not going to be a recurring enemy most likely because most hill giants are really stupid. What hill giants are really good for is hero fodder or for a low level boss. Like its challenge rating 5, hit points are 105, its armor class is shit, so it's relatively easy to hit. The only thing it has going for it is its strength and its damage. So the hill giant is a nice bulky enemy, like an earlier adventure boss type enemy to be having. Like, of course, challenge rating 5 means that a group of level 5 players should be able to surpass it. So I could see you may be introducing it a bit earlier if you wanted to have it be a really tough fight, even though obviously the hill giant's damage is quite formidable with its great club doing 3d8 plus 5, and it has a plus 8 to hit, a reach of 10 feet, and it makes 2 great club attacks with its multi-attack. Plus, it has its relatively long-range rock attack, which is even more damaging than the great club in a single attack. So yeah, your hill giant, I'm gonna say, is more of a early game boss, a late game mook, kind of, to just throw at your players. Most likely you're not going to be making a very memorable NPC out of them. But again, that's up to someone being inventive. Then we have the Stone Giant. The Stone Giant has a challenge rating of 7, but honestly, it doesn't exactly earn this. It doesn't really earn its challenge rating all that much. If you just look at its basic if you look at its basic statistics, well, it does, but it's a bit different. It's barely stronger than the hill giant in terms of health, but here's where it makes up for that superficial weakness. It at first appears to be basically a glorified hill giant in that its weapons don't do any more damage, except for the fact that its rock does a shit ton of damage, and it knocks you prone. So, if we read into it a lot more, the Stone Giant has an armor class of 17, which is higher than most other giants, and that's due to its natural armor. Its dexterity is relatively high as well. So this guy is pretty strong, has dark vision, has really good athletic skill. He gets a plus 12 to his athletics. He has some decent saving throws. And yeah, his rock not only does 4d10 plus 6 damage and has a plus 9 to hit, but if the target is a creature, they need to make a DC 17 strength saving throw or be knocked prone. That's fucking deadly. DC 17 at a challenge rating 7, that's pretty freaking legit, honestly. I can see situations where the Stone Giant is more dangerous than a Fire Giant. And I'm not afraid to say that, especially if you had like if you had several of these guys, and they don't even need to get close to you. They can throw these rocks at you, and these rocks hurt. I would not want to fight one of those guys alone. Additionally, it can catch rocks really easily. DC 10 dexterity saving throw, it just freaking grabs any rock that's been thrown at it, which honestly isn't very likely for human players. They're unlikely to do that unless they're trying to kill it with like a catapult, and they're like shooting rocks out of a catapult at it. And they of course have stone camouflage. They make really good stealth checks in to hide in rocky terrain. So let's talk about the Stone Giant a bit more from a flavor perspective. We already know he's a powerful adversary, as we've talked about there. But referring to the flavor text about Stone Giants are kind of the little brother to the Storm Giant in that they're very much the thinkers. The Stone Giants are protective of their territory, but they're neutral. They aren't really going out of their way to cause harm to anyone. And they're mostly artisans. They really like to craft things and make nice artwork, and essentially your level in their society is determined by how good you are at sculpting things. So the stone giant uh, is interesting in that regard. You could see them being a culture that the party could get to know if you kind of expanded the flavor text a bit, with these guys being like really good artisans. Perhaps you even have like a kingdom where a stone giant is working as an artisan and he crafts things. Hell, if the players are wealthy enough and they got like their own base, you might have a stone giant like hawking goods at them. Because one thing you're going to learn about the giants is that a lot of them are not fans of artwork or making goods, and the stone giant are definitely an exception to this rule. They're very much into crafting, crafting good works and like artisan work as opposed to waging war. But the stone giant is, as I've stated before, a strong opponent. If you ever had the party fight one of these guys, they'd be a very worthy adversary. Well, here, of course, they would say a level 7 party, but I can see the stone giant actually being quite a viable threat past then. I mean, it would at least pose a lot of physical damage to player characters, if not outright beating at least one of them into unconsciousness. Now, of course, I'm not going to say, like, death, because it's hard to kill people in D&D 5th. Moving on to the Frost Giant. If you are a fan of Norse mythology, or if you've even just watched Thor, then you know what to expect from these guys. They are neutral evil. They're essentially evil for evil's sake. Now, as for their challenge rating 8, meaning that they are just barely more challenging than the Stone Giant. In terms of HP, their average HP is just a bit higher than the Stone Giants, but again, remember that since you're rolling for it, there's a lot more range to it. As opposed to 11d12 plus 55 for the Stone Giant, you're rolling 12d12 plus 60, so there's a bit more range in the HP, but it's actually not all that big a difference. Unlike the Stone Giant, the Frost Giant is not dexterous at all. He only has an armor class of 15. His saving throws are okay. Essentially, the one thing this guy has got going for him is increased damage and his immunity to cold. Now, he uses a Great Axe, which is 3d12 plus 6 at a plus 9 to hit. This is in comparison to his predecessor's 3d8 plus 6. So that's quite a sizable difference in damage. And of course, he's still got his multi-attack. And then his rock will do a 4d10 plus 6 bludgeoning, which is the same as the Stone Giant, except his is actually a bit crappier. His does not knock people prone. So in reality, I can actually really see the Frost Giant being lower in real challenge than the Stone Giant. I think the danger, the real increased challenge from a Frost Giant comes from the fact that they are evil, they will go out of their way to attack people, and that they are more likely to fight in groups, because this is a warrior society. The Frost Giants care only for warfare, they only care about forging their own armor and things like that. So would Frost Giants make a great antagonist? Not a great villain. A Frost Giant would not really make a good villain, just because they're not all that intelligent, or even they're slightly charismatic. They wouldn't make a good villain, but they would make a good army, or a good hostile force, like a threatening force like Frost Giants. Or a Frost Giant would make a really good guard for a villain, or for something like that. Like somehow he's gotten a Frost Giant to work for him, or something like that. Or maybe the villain is someone like a Cloud Giant or a Storm Giant who's gotten Frost Giants to assist him. In fact, in the Cloud Giants thing, it straight up says that the Cloud Giant tends to have Frost Giants or Fire Giants working for it. So let's move on to someone that is really actually quite separate in his level of threat from the Stone Giant, I would say. This is the Fire Giant. The Fire Giant is challenge rating 9, 2 steps up from the Stone Giant, 1 step up from the Frost Giant, but in terms of difficulty to fight, he's on a whole other level than the Frost Giant. I would say, because his hit points are 13d12 plus 78, so you're going to get a much higher hit point average of 162. My favorite thing is he has an armor class of 18. You might recall that even the Stone Giant has his natural armor of 17. So because of his plate mail, the Fire Giant is actually bulkier in that case. His base stats are overall better. Now, what does he get? He has his Great Sword. Now, the Great Sword is interesting because it does 66 plus 7. What this means is essentially, though the Frost Giant has his 3d12 plus 6, which is pretty menacing in itself, the Fire Giant not only gets a multi-attack, but he rolls 66 plus 7 with a plus 11 to hit. This means that on average, he's going to be doing more damage than the Frost Giant because he has more dice to roll, and therefore is going to have less failed rolls in general. He has his Rock, of course, which besides having a higher to hit, is basically no different than the Frost Giants. It's the same damage, the same rather powerful damage, mind you. 4d10 plus 7, a maximum of 47 damage. Now here is something else. He has a passive perception of 16, which means he's pretty good at hearing things coming, or seeing things coming even. And he has a damage immunity to fire. Now what makes this better than the Frost Giants is that fire is a really common element in D&D. It's used for a lot of spells and even for a lot of improvised weaponry. So the Fire Giant is really like nullifying a lot of powers that can be sent against him, especially if you're a sorcerer. And your sorcerer, like in 5th edition, because sorcerers have so few spells, you've probably done a lot of offensive spells, and you've probably gone with quite a few fire spells. Those things are useless against the Fire Giant. Quite literally useless. I remember we had a campaign once where we were fighting a Fire Giant, but none of us knew it was a Fire Giant, so Brendan decided to set up a wall of flame to protect us from this giant enemy. And what did the giant do but run through the wall of flame? And all that happened now is that we were trapped inside of essentially a ring of fire. So that did not bode well for us. And having fought Fire Giants before in campaigns, I can say these guys are scary in straight-up combat if you're the right level. And honestly, Fire Giants make terrific villains for a story because they're not necessarily unintelligent. A Fire Giant, because of their militaristic bent, is a really good boss enemy to have. Or even, like I said, you can have them as a menace. Now, the Fire Giant, like for example, you have a Fire Giant be like a general in an army. Because the thing with the Fire Giants is they are, of course, lawful evil, so they have order, but they are militaristic. Unlike the Frost Giants, who are all about raiding and plundering, the Fire Giant is part of an actual military. They are a disciplined fighting force, and that's what kind of makes them scary. You would not want to go up against, like, an entire army of these Fire Giants. That would be scary as fuck. So now, after him, we get onto the Cloud Giant. Same challenge rating as the Fire Giant. Now, what sets Cloud Giant apart from the Fire Giant, of course, besides elemental differences, he has a lower armor class of 14, because all he has is his natural armor. Now, his hit points are quite a bit larger, an average of 200, 16d12 plus 96 in terms of HP. So his HP is higher. He has quite a few good saving throws. He has Insight and Perception as his skills that both get a plus 7, so that's pretty good. His passive perception is high. He speaks Common, unlike unlike the lower giants who do not understand that language. He has Keen Smell. The giant has advantage on perception checks that rely on smell. We would assume that that is a reference to something like Jack and the Beanstalk, where what could ostensibly be considered a cloud giant was able to smell the blood of an Englishman. So, he also has innate spellcasting. This really sets the Cloud Giant apart from the earlier forms of giant in that he has spells. He has at will detect magic, fog, cloud, and light, which are pretty good. 3 times a day, he has Featherfall, Fly, Misty Step, Telekinesis. So think about this. This guy has Fly, which basically, allows him to fly. Misty Step, Telekinesis. These are some good abilities to fuck with people. And let's say he has Fly, and you're just like, you do like an anti-magic or like a counter spell, and you stop him from flying. Well, while he's falling, he can probably just cast Featherfall and save his ass. And then once a day each, he has control weather in gaseous form. So before you're even facing this guy, if he's aware of your presence, he can make your life hell by controlling the weather. Or if you're scary, like you're too tough for him, he'll use gaseous form and he'll escape. So that's a really cool guy. That's why I think the Cloud Giant, more than basically any other giant, makes a good villain if you're fighting an evil one, because he's so difficult to pin down, and he can just like leave and shit like that. He can just get away from you really easily if he wants to, and by himself he's actually quite a threat. Now, additionally, if you have a Cloud Giant as a good guy, his mobility is pretty great. You could have it be rather comedic, where he literally just flies in at random instances and fucking talks to the party. It'd be great. Okay, so that's his spellcasting. He has his Morning Star, which does 3d8 plus 8 piercing damage, and a plus 12 to hit. So that's pretty nasty, and he makes 2 of those attacks. It's not as powerful as some of the other giants, like even the earlier giants, but that's because the Cloud Giant isn't meant to fight as much, but still, because of his staying power, that's still pretty scary. He has a plus 12 to hit with his 4d10 plus 8 rock, so that's actually pretty scary as well. The Cloud Giant is all about accruing wealth and things like that, so you could imagine how a Cloud Giant could easily come into conflict with a group of humans if he's like just stealing from people and raiding shit from the villages and things like that. Or he's getting other giants to do it for him, or just other servants to do it for him. The Cloud Giant could conceivably be a real threat, or alternatively, you could have him be a benefactor to the party. If he's a good Cloud Giant, he might see ways of increasing his own prestige by assisting some heroes. So remember with the Cloud Giant that it can go 2 ways. This guy can either be a real hindrance and probably a really good villain, or he could be a rather strong ally for the party if you feel that they need one or if it's central to the plot. So Cloud Giants, really cool. They have some of the best flavor text where it all talks about like them wanting riches and wanting esteem. And they don't just hoard gold like dragons. They actually want things that have aesthetic value to them. They'll have people fight for their honor for them and things like that. But the best thing about the Cloud Giant is that they're gamblers. The Cloud Giants really like to make these really huge wagers. Like they'll even make wagers about like what side is going to win a war. So you can imagine that, let's say a party needs to get somewhere or something. Like let's say just for instance, okay, this is going to be a bit outlandish, but let's say they need like an airship or something to get somewhere. And it's like, well, shit, no one builds airships around here. What are we gonna do? And they hear, of course, that there's this frickin' Cloud Giant that has an airship. So they go to Cloud Giant, they ask for it. Cloud Giant says, "Fuck no, I'm not giving you my airship." Someone challenges him to a wager. Like you find something that he wants, and you make a bet on it, and then it's up to the players to somehow win the bet. And if you got some morally ambiguous players, that's funny, because in the Cloud Giant code, you're allowed to cheat as long as you don't get caught, so pretty freaking hilarious. So yeah, you could really make something really high stakes out of it. So the Cloud Giant is really really useful in all circumstances, as far as later game characters are concerned. I can really see the implications of that. Now, we have the last one and the strongest one, the Storm Giant. If you're like looking at the Storm Giant, you're not finding much except for the fact that he is essentially just a far better version of the Cloud Giant. He is challenge rating 13. He gets bonuses to basically every stat, especially Constitution and Strength. His Strength, which is almost 30, it's almost the maximum you can basically have. His saving throws are great, especially his Strength saving throw of plus 14, Constitution plus 10. He has good Arcana, Athletics, History, and Perception. He gets crazy bonuses to those, especially to his Athletics. He resists cold, and he is immune to lightning and thunder. Those are some other common spell elements taken out. He has a passive perception of 19, so good luck sneaking up on him. He, of course, speaks Common. What's great about these guys as well is they're amphibious, and they have a really good speed and swimming speed, both being 50 feet. So these guys are really fast as well. They also have innate spellcasting with a spell save DC of 17. At will, detect magic, featherfall, levitate, and light. And then 3 days each, control weather and water breathing. Absolutely no clue why he'd need... Well, I can see he'd use water breathing on other people if he wants them to be able to breathe underwater, because he himself has no need for it. But his other spells, it's like essentially the Storm Giant doesn't have really much in the way of offensive spells, because in all honesty, he doesn't need it. He's powerful enough. His Greatsword, he makes 2 Greatsword attacks. It's essentially the same damage as the Fire Giant, 66 plus 9 in this case, but with a plus 14 to hit. So he is most likely going to hit you when he attacks, and he's attacking twice with that Greatsword. Now his rock does 4d12 plus 9, so his boulder is surprisingly stronger than the other ones, and again at a plus 14 to hit. Now he also has his Lightning Strike. He hurls a magical lightning bolt at a point he can see within 500 feet. Yeah, the giant hurls a magical lightning bolt at a point it can see within 500 feet of it. That is insane. That's 500 feet that it's throwing that. The spell Lightning Bolt only has a like 100-foot range. This guy is doing 5 times that, and it fucking hurts. Each creature within 10 feet of that point must make a DC 17 Dexterity saving throw, taking 12d8 lightning damage on a failed save or half as much on a successful one. So, what is being implied here is that you get hit by that lightning strike, you're fucked up. Like, sure, he's challenge rating 13, so you're only fighting him at, like, level 13 or something like that, or maybe even later. But that is freaking massive. At 500 feet, you are well outside of range of attacking that guy, and he has already laid down some massive hurt on you, especially since tons of groups, most groups, will huddle really closely together, at least before they get into combat. That's when they'll, like, spread out. So if you have, like, the adventuring party all within, like, a few feet of them, like, all within a few feet, he's gonna fuck them up with that lightning strike. And then if, like, they decide that they're gonna, like, hide and, like, rest until they regain that, he'll just lightning strike them again, or he'll come over there and he'll beat the crap out of them. That being said, if you're fighting a Storm Giant, you're doing something wrong. Because the Storm Giant is a chaotic good creature. Unless you've done something he considers evil, the Storm Giant most likely is not going to attack you. That's a cool thing. These Storm Giants are philosophers and they're seers. So, essentially, a Storm Giant is far more likely to aid a party, probably by giving them information, and they can also give, like, prophecies and things like that. But we see Storm Giant as essentially being a wise man. It would be like a really esoteric thing. Like, maybe at one point in the plot, the party needs to go find someone for guidance, and the best person to give them that guidance happens to be a storm giant, and that would be a terrific situation to bring in the Storm Giant. So that's basically going through all the giants. I think that they are really well done in 5th edition D&D. And I would like to hear people's stories about how they've used giants in their campaigns. Because I haven't gotten too much chance to use them. Most of the time, I've run into fire giants, which are freaking terrific. But I'd love to hear the stories, because giants are one of those iconic D&D races that we kind of think about as, you know, a lot of people don't talk about them because they're always there. But I really like what's been done in 5th edition with the giants. So leave any comments about what you think about the giants in D&D. or anything else, if you have any requests of like videos you'd want me to do, I'll probably do them because honestly I don't have anything better to do. Like, comment, subscribe if you haven't. Though I'm not forcing you to. You can choose to not subscribe, but I'm just saying, you know, it's probably not the worst thing you could do.